right. Hello, hello. Amazing. So now we have our final speaker for the day. Afterwards, there's some panels, so we don't call it a day already. But final speaker, some official authorities here in the room, BaFin. So if you do shady stuff, leave the room now. Last chance. And with this, I'm happily inviting our speaker. They are up to the stage. Yeah, big round of applause for our final speaker for the day, please.
So yeah, hey, thank you. It's great to be here and to present the DLT Pilot Regime also. So from my perspective, I think it's a good bridge building initiative from capital or for crypto asset ecosystems and markets, what you have already heard so far on Mika. So coming back to traditional finance and financial market services. And yeah, I would like to present you the DLT Pilot Regime and what it is, means in the meaning of financial market infrastructure. So let us have a closer look in setting the scene, how things work actually. And I assume that not many of you are familiar with post-trade services, or what happens following a trade is conducted on a trading venue. So therefore, maybe just have a brief look here. What is a typical setting on different financial market infrastructures? So at first, we have a multilateral trading facility. So that is where the trading takes place, and typically under the current regulation, Alice and Bob here as buyer and seller of securities in a financial market are required to have access only by intermediaries. So there is no chance for private persons, personal persons, and without intermediary to get access to the trading venue. So what is most important here is that is in the middle, there are also operated systems. So one which is called here the SSS is a security settlement system, which is operated by a centralized security depository. And when it comes to the cash leg of the transaction, there's also a payment settlement system, which is operated typically for central bank money by the Euro system here in Europe. So that requires Alice and Bob to have various contractual arrangement with intermediaries, with their bank for the cash and their securities accounts, and that is how things actually work, and where many legal entities are operating systems in the back, ensuring efficiency but also safety of financial transaction between financial institutions. But actually there's no direct interaction of Alice and Bob with any of these system operators. So that is where the DLT pilot regime kicks in. So it is in particular about DLT financial market infrastructures. It is about tokenization of financial instruments. It's on secondary markets, because actually we see that there is no liquid market available for electronic securities which are issued on a DLT or on a blockchain system. And what is also really important is that there is direct access possible for retail investors to these types of system operators. So what is really of importance, and what is I think is some kind of unique here in the European in Europe and European regulation. So the European legislator introduced as part of the digital finance package, so where also Mika is one of the legislative proposals of, to really allow for these supervised services like operating a trading venue and a settlement system to explore and develop new technology. So in particular, distributed ledger technology in the financial sector. So that is so unique. Here we have a specific regulation provided by the European legislator to allow really exploring and implementing DLT-based solutions for trading and settlement of transactions in electronic securities. The DLT pilot regime in itself follows a specific approach. So there's an approach of exemptions and compensatory measures to really ensure and allow the use of DLT in these services, and to really acknowledge that there are specific characteristics which have to be taken into account from supervisors and regulators. What is also important here is maybe just to briefly highlight that there's a specific definition of DLT financial instruments. So everything around the pilot regime refers to financial instruments which are issued, recorded, transferred, and stored on a DLT. So that is specific. Anything else still refers to what is already in traditional regulatory frameworks, like the Central Depository, Securities Depository Regulation, and the MiFID. So if we come back now, taking the pilot regime and applying it to these traditional financial infrastructure services, so what we see here, Alice and Bob are also conducting a transaction in electronic securities or DLT financial instruments. And what is obvious here, so there is no further need for Alice and Bob to have interaction with an intermediary for the access to the trading venue, and also not with access to the settlement system of these specific DLT-based instruments. But what is still applicable here is to ensure that there is risk mitigation between the settlement system for securities and the payment system. There's a so-called process required that is called delivery versus payment, and that shall ensure that only both assets will be transferred between Alice and Bob to reduce counterparty credit risk. Okay, so then let's apply the pilot regime here on what we know from traditional markets. So we see that there is no intermediary for the access, and then the pilot regime applies on the level of the market of the DLT MTF, so that is a trading venue, and on the level of the security settlement system. So that is really unique here, so it is allowed to provide such services based on DLT systems. And on the next slide, I will give you a brief overview how that is implemented. So first, I will cover the DLT MTF side. So that is, or what remains is the application of the existing regulatory framework. But in addition, there are exemptions allowed, which results from the DLT pilot regime. So therefore, in particular, there is access of natural persons to these MTFs, so no longer requiring access via intermediaries. And in addition, there are also some exemptions regarding transaction reporting, so that is based on assumed transparency by the blockchain or DLT-based system. And what is also applicable here, but that is holds true for every type of the DLT market infrastructures, is that the pilot regime also includes some specific provisions addressing the characteristics of DLT-based systems. So that is new here, in particular on level of financial market infrastructures, and therefore there are some additional requirements. I wouldn't go not into the details here because that's really legal stuff and specific provisions, but please feel free to reach out if there is any particular question on one of the exemptions or provisions related to the DLT pilot regime. On the other hand, the other type of DLT financial market infrastructures is a DLT settlement system, so that covers all about custody and transfer of DLT-based financial instruments, and here it's the same approach. Traditional regulatory frameworks, the CSDR is applicable, and in addition, the DLT pilot regime allows various exemptions from these provisions. Some are more related to legal definitions and requirements, some are more related to technical requirements in terms of business continuity, availability, and integrity of the systems. And as mentioned before, there can be these exemptions requested, and on the other hand, then it requires additional compensatory measures. And what is also somehow unique here, actually both services can only be provided by different entities in the DLT pilot regime, and the European legislator acknowledged that there is some kind of interaction between trading and settlement, and therefore it is also introduced a combination of these services, which is a so-called DLT trading and settlement system that combines both of these services and can now be provided by one legal entity. The DLT pilot regime itself has some limitations, so that is based on innovation. So as mentioned, it aims to promote and develop DLT-based systems, but on the other hand, the application of new DLT-based infrastructure bears the risk of fragmentation, in particular technical fragmentation, and therefore to address these concerns for financial stability risk, there were some limitations introduced. So therefore the aggregated market value of all financial instruments being traded or settled within one entity is kept at the volume at 6 billion euro, and there are only different types allowed. So here some in terms of financial instrument, it is only possible to trade and settle shares, bonds, and unit in collective investment undertakings. So that are specific types of financial instruments. And here are also some caps applicable in light of of the specific market cap of these financial instruments. So what is important in particular here in a broader application of the pilot regime, so the definition, as said earlier, also refers to the term issuance, and one may assume that require private or legal governance by applicable law, but the European authorities already provided a Q&A on that, and in light of real-world asset tokenization, it remains important that the legal status of tokenized instruments has to be assessed, but the pilot regime also allows tokenization of already existing financial instruments. So that is really meant in a broader sense. Then maybe I skip that here. So that is really the general approach. These requirements and exemptions have to be proportionate and justified by the specific setting of the DLT-based system. And on the other hand, compensatory measures have to be deemed to ensure investor protection, market integrity, and financial stability, and that is in the assessment of the respective competent authority. And what is important here, maybe also from a development perspective on implementation, so any reference to DLT-based systems in terms of the degree of decentralization has to be understood in a broad way. So that means that also the use of public permissionless blockchain protocols is possible, and therefore it is really the aim here on the pilot regime to promote innovation. So there's no specific limitation or restrictions here on the specific settings of a DLT-based system. What we also see and what is results from the application of the delivery versus payment process is that settlement of securities transactions have to be settled in money. So therefore the European legislator also introduced that there might be used money in a tokenized form, which is actually not really available for commercial bank money and central bank money. And on the other hand, it also allowed and introduced that e-money tokens can be used as one specific form of stable coins. From an investor perspective, it is, or let me first come to the technical perspective, because that is also important here for the audience. When it comes to the development of the DVP approach, so that is actually regulatory challenging, but on the other side, providing new solutions for the cash transfer resulting from the settlement of transactions is also an opportunity, because what we have already seen is that there are some approaches like the atomic swaps, hash time lock contracts being used, and therefore from a technical perspective it is really an interesting field to develop further innovative solutions for the settlement of the cash leg of transactions. On the other side, from an investor and regulatory perspective, ensuring this settlement on a DVP basis is really of importance, and also from the issuance process. So that is really then being traded and settled on secondary markets. So there's an increase in the liquidity of the instruments, and also it is applicable from a safety perspective and from an efficiency perspective, what we already know from traditional market and systems. So what actually takes place in the backbone of transaction settlement, but what really ensures the well-functioning of the financial sector in overall. And therefore here the DLT pilot regime provides some legal certainty on regulatory and supervised services, in particular with regard to the settlement of transactions, and ensuring the settlement in a DVP is a prerequisite for having liquid markets and trading on secondary trading venues. In addition, so what is also here in terms of research and academic very interesting is that these services provided on a DLT-based system addresses many questions of interoperability. So that is really applying DLT to financial market infrastructures is really at the core level of a technology infrastructure. So it is not only on the level of services being provided. So there is a large demand of having interoperability and availability of technical and legal interaction of different systems, looking at wallet providers, looking at credit institutions and investment firms providing specific services, in particular with regard to the custody of financial instruments. It is of importance to ensure and provide solutions for interoperability among DLT-based market infrastructures and existing systems in the financial sector, but also in terms of DLT market infrastructures themselves, because there are a huge variety of DLT systems or blockchain protocols available, and here it is important to allow technical interaction. If one trading venue is, for example, operated as a smart contract on the Polygon blockchain, and and the wallet providers are not working with Polygon, so then questions may arise how things will be ensured and how the overall market may work together, not only from a technical perspective but also from legal perspective, because all these interaction requires legal arrangements for providing services. So then I finish my presentation here and pause and see if there's any question. I know that in particular in terms of legal requirements and specific provisions, it is just an overview, because these exemptions are really related to existing provisions on financial market sector, which is not well known to many of us, because that takes place behind our securities transaction and booking in securities accounts on our credit institutions. So thank you for attention.
Yeah, thanks for that talk. Do we have questions?
Test. Hi, my name is Duk. I'm working for WM Datenservice, and I would like to know your personal opinion on the DLT Pilot Regime. Are you satisfied or content with how it developed right now? I'm asking because we have the pilot regime, but we don't have any pilots yet, as of now, or as I know. And there's often the perceptions that innovation or regulation is too strict, and companies have way too much to invest before getting the license. And still, if you get the license, it's still uncertain how the ecosystem will develop, so you can have like a valid business case. So what's your opinion on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So indeed, so the DLT pilot regime is applicable more than 1.5 years, and we are already in authorization procedures, but not having yet authorized any DLT market infrastructure in Europe so far. And maybe as for any new kind of regulation, and in particular as this allows specific exemptions, so that has to be discussed on a European level to ensure harmonization. And then what is heavily discussed on many conferences and discussions with market stakeholders. So it is a question of education. So you have to ensure that what is really done here, and we see different approaches. So one may use of enterprise solutions, so that might be easier to implement from a compliance perspective, because you have to only set up a specific network and providing roles and access. And on the other side, when it really comes to the use of permission public blockchain, so then it is really important to ensure how things work, how smart contract integrity is ensured, and that is really heavily discussed. And there's a step-by-step approach, and hopefully we can or we will see first authorization under the pilot regime by end of the year. Okay.
Thanks for that extensive answer. We have room for another 1 or 2 questions, I believe. So we're in Germany and there's no regulation question. What's happening here? Okay. Then maybe another one. How can people reach you in your day-to-day life? So are you like off the grid and, not addressable, or can people reach you via, I don't know, LinkedIn, email, whatever, to
indeed,
follow-up questions?
Yeah, people can reach out via LinkedIn, or they can call at BaFin. So my name is already known here by the presentation, so then just let you connect with me, and then we can also discuss specific questions, because I know if we would go into the details now, so that many of these things are very first detailed, but then maybe unknown, because that really is how things work on a top tier level for operators of systems. And here many questions or exemptions are based or result from legal questions and definitions, and therefore, please feel free. I would like to invite you to reach out if there's any specific question open. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Then big round of applause for our speaker, please.
Thank you.